Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Mm,
Today we're going to be talking about something that I think affects pretty much all of us,
yeah.
and that is scams and identity theft.
hmm
Um, it used to be we just had to worry about shady characters in dark alleys.
Right.
But now the alleys have moved online and the scammers are getting super creative.
Absolutely. And it's pretty frightening what they're able to do now,
It is.
especially with AI.
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff that we're reading in this material
Yeah.
is talking about deep fake audio,
Oh, wow.
where they can actually mimic the voices of loved ones
Oh, God.
and manipulate people into sending money.
Wow. Yeah. I've read about the deep fake videos, but audio is that's a whole other level.
It is.
That's a whole other level of scary.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening.
So what are we hoping to really extract from all this material today?
Well, I think the most important thing is to really define the threat. I mean,
Okay.
these are serious problems with far-reaching consequences.
Yeah.
We want to help you identify, the common scams that are out there, how to
Right.
recognize those warning signs,
Mm-hmm.
what you can do to protect yourself,
Yeah.
how to report incidents if you do become a victim,
Yeah.
and then really understand, the implications of
Right.
what happens if you do fall victim to one of these scams.
Right. It's not just the financial hit, it's the
The
emotional,
whole ripple effect.
it's the ripple effect. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it can really impact your life in a lot of different ways.
So I think it's really interesting how the material that we're looking at today really emphasizes that these are not just like minor annoyances.
Right.
This is serious stuff.
Exactly. It's easy to dismiss, those phishing emails or those calls about winning a cruise.
Yeah.
But the truth is, these scammers are getting incredibly good at what they do.
Yeah.
They prey on our trust, our emotions, and even our desire to help others.
Yeah. And I'll admit I've totally fallen for those congratulations you've won messages. Thankfully, I've never clicked on anything.
Sure.
But the temptation was definitely there,
Of course.
you know? And I think it's interesting how the source material mentions a study that found that people are more likely to fall for scams
hmm
when they're feeling stressed or lonely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you're more vulnerable when you're in that state.
Yeah.
So they're experts at exploiting vulnerability.
Right.
And when we're emotionally vulnerable, our defenses are down.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's so important to be aware of, the psychological tactics they use.
Yeah.
For example, they often create a sense of urgency.
Right.
They'll pressure you to act quickly
Yeah.
without thinking things through.
Oh, I know. And I remember getting a call once
Yeah?
claiming to be from the IRS.
Oh.
And the caller was so aggressive, demanding immediate payment,
Oh, wow.
threatening legal action.
Right.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
And looking back, it's so obvious it was a scam.
Right.
But in the moment, it's easy to get caught up in the fear.
Absolutely. And that's why, one of the most crucial pieces of advice is to independently verify any unsolicited contact.
Okay.
So whether it's a phone call, an email, a text message, or even a DM on social media,
Right.
don't take anything at face value.
So if someone calls me claiming to be from my bank
Right.
and asking for my account number,
Yep.
I shouldn't just hand it over.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
A legitimate institution
Mm.
will never pressure you into providing sensitive information over the phone or through an unsolicited email.
Okay.
So hang up.
Yeah.
Find the official number for your bank. Call them directly
Got it.
and verify the request.
So no more giving out my personal information over the phone.
Exactly.
Okay, but what about those click here to claim your prize links?
Oh, yeah.
I have to admit, I'm sometimes tempted to click,
Sure.
especially if it's something I really want,
Right.
like a free trip or a new gadget.
Well, and that's where it gets really interesting and dangerous.
Okay.
The material uses a great analogy. Clicking on a link from an unknown source is like opening your front door to a stranger. You never know what they might bring into your digital home.
Okay.
It could be malware, a virus, or a way to steal your information.
Yikes. So no more clicking on random links,
Right.
no matter how tempting.
Exactly.
Okay, and I guess the same goes for sharing my personal information online, right?
Absolutely. You want to guard your personal information fiercely because it's the key to your identity.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Would you give a stranger your house keys?
Right.
Your personal information is just as valuable, if not more so.
Mm.
Once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah.
And recovering from identity theft can be a long and arduous process.
Yeah. It's funny because we're so careful about locking our doors and windows
Sure.
in the real world.
Exactly.
But sometimes we forget to apply that same level of security to our online lives.
That's a great point. we've become so accustomed to sharing information online that we
Yeah.
sometimes forget the potential risks. But the reality is, anything you post online can be used against you.
Oh, wow.
Scammers can use your social media posts to gather information about you, learn about your habits, and even target you with personalized scams.
So it's not just about being careful about what information I share directly. It's about my whole online presence.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to understand how to manage your privacy settings
Right.
on social media and other online platforms.
Okay. So we talked about being cautious about sharing information over the phone and online.
Mm-hmm.
What about unsolicited emails?
Ah, yes.
Those seem to be the breeding ground for phishing scams, right?
You're right. Those phishing emails are a major problem.
Yeah.
They often look incredibly legitimate,
Right.
using official logos and language
Uh-huh.
to trick you into thinking they're from a trusted source,
Yeah.
like your bank, a retailer, or even a government agency. But if you look closely,
Yeah.
there are usually telltale signs that they're fake.
Like what should we be looking for?
One common red flag is misspellings or grammatical errors.
Okay.
Legitimate organizations usually have professional proofreaders. So if an email is riddled with typos,
Right.
that's a big warning sign.
So typos, check. What else?
Another red flag is a suspicious sender address.
Oh,
So if the
oh.
email claims to be from your bank, but the sender address is something generic like norreply@randomdomain.com,
Right.
that's a clear indication that it's not legitimate.
It's like getting a letter from the government,
Right.
but it's postmarked from a random island in the Caribbean.
Exactly.
Something's not right.
Something's fishy.
Exactly.
And finally, be wary of any email that creates a sense of urgency or demands immediate action.
Okay.
Scammers often use scare tactics
Right.
to pressure you into clicking on a link or providing information without thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're ever in doubt, it's always best to contact the organization directly,
Right.
using a phone number or website that you know is legitimate.
You know, it's amazing how much damage these scammers can do with just a few well-crafted emails.
I know it is.
It's almost like they're digital con artists
That's a great analogy.
playing on our emotions and our trust.
Yeah, they're masters of manipulation,
Yeah.
and they're constantly evolving their tactics
Right.
to stay ahead of the curve.
So it sounds like the key takeaway here is vigilance.
Absolutely.
We need to be our own first line of defense,
Mm-hmm.
carefully scrutinizing every email, phone call, and online interaction
Yes,
to protect ourselves from these digital predators.
exactly. It's all about being proactive and taking control of our online security.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
We've talked about how sophisticated these scammers have gotten, the psychological tactics that they use, the importance of guarding our information fiercely,
Right.
both online and offline.
Yep.
We've also touched on those warning signs to look for in suspicious emails and phone calls,
Mm-hmm.
highlighting the importance of independent verification
Absolutely.
and trusting our gut instincts.
Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to remember that we're going to be continuing this conversation
That's right.
in the next part of our deep dive.
Yes.
We're going to explore some specific types of scams,
Yeah.
like imposter scams and romance scams,
Mm.
and really delve even deeper into the emotional and legal consequences of identity theft.
Yeah, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty.
It's going to be fascinating and hopefully empowering to learn more about how to protect ourselves in this crazy digital landscape.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to our deep dive into scams and identity theft.
Mm.
In the first part, we talked about, being really careful about guarding our personal information
Right.
and being wary of those offers that just seem too good to be true.
Absolutely.
But what happens if we do fall victim?
Mm.
The source material really goes beyond just prevention.
Right.
It talks about what to do if you think you've been targeted.
Exactly. It's not just about avoiding scams. It's also about knowing how to react if you think you've been compromised.
Yeah.
And recognizing the signs,
Yeah. Have you ever had that nagging feeling
Oh, where?
that something just wasn't quite right
Sure.
with an online transaction or a phone call?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember this one time I got this email and it looked exactly like it was from my favorite online store
Mm-hmm.
announcing this huge sale.
Yeah.
But something about the formatting seemed off.
Yeah.
It just felt a little clunky.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I checked the sender's email address
Ah, cool.
before I clicked on anything, and sure enough, it was a fake.
That's a perfect example of how, Paying attention to those small details can save you from a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
The material mentions that, phishing emails often contain these subtle clues,
Right.
like misspellings, grammatical errors, or even slightly off logos.
Yeah.
It's like spotting a counterfeit bill.
Uh-huh.
Once you know what to look for,
Right.
you can start to see through the disguise.
So it's almost like learning a new language.
It is.
The language of scams. Yeah, you start to recognize the patterns, the telltale signs.
Exactly.
That something isn't quite right.
And the more you familiarize yourself with these red flags, the more confident you'll become in identifying and avoiding scams.
One thing that really surprised me in the source material was the discussion of imposter scams.
Oh, yeah.
It's incredible how convincing these scammers can be,
It is.
impersonating everyone from government officials to tech support representatives to even long-lost relatives.
Right. It's mind-boggling. They prey on our emotions, our trust, and even our desire to help.
Yeah.
The material shares the story about a woman who was scammed by someone posing as her grandson,
Oh, gas.
claiming he was in trouble and needed money wired immediately.
Oh, wow.
And she was so worried about him that she didn't even question the request.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. It really highlights how vulnerable we can be
Right.
when our emotions are involved.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to be cautious, even when dealing with people who seem familiar or trustworthy. If someone contacts you out of the blue with an urgent request,
Right.
especially if it involves money, take a step back and verify their identity independently.
Huh?
Don't be afraid to ask questions, even if it feels awkward.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to be safe than sorry.
So we've talked about recognizing the signs of a scam.
Right.
But what are some practical steps that we can take to protect ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
The material mentions the importance of safeguarding our personal information.
Yes.
What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, it starts with being mindful of what we share online.
Okay.
Social media can be a goldmine for scammers.
Right.
They can gather information about you, your interests, your habits, even your location, just by scrolling through your posts.
I've been trying to be more mindful of that lately.
Good.
I used to just post everything online.
Here.
My vacation photos, my check-ins at restaurants, even my birthday.
Yeah.
But now I'm much more selective about what I share publicly. It's a little unsettling to think that someone could be using that information to target me.
I think that's a really smart approach. It's all about finding that balance between sharing and protecting your privacy.
Yeah.
And it's not just social media.
Right.
Think about those online quizzes and surveys that ask for personal information.
Oh, yeah.
Do you really need to give them your mother's maiden name or your first pet's name just to find out what kind of pizza topping you are?
Okay, good point. I'm definitely guilty of filling those out
Yeah.
without really thinking about where that information might end up.
And then there are those free trial offers that require your credit card information.
Oh, yeah.
Always read the fine print. Because sometimes those trials automatically convert to paid subscriptions if you don't cancel in time.
Right. It's like those gym memberships that
Exactly.
are impossible to get out of.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it sounds like the key takeaway here is to be really intentional about what information we share online.
Yes.
And to always read the fine print before handing over any personal details.
Right. And it's not just about what you share online. It's also about how you protect your devices and accounts.
Okay.
Strong passwords are crucial.
Right.
Don't use the same password for multiple accounts.
I know. It's so tempting to just use the same easy-to-remember password for everything.
I know, but that's like using the same key for your house, your car, and your safe deposit box.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. And consider using a password manager.
Okay.
It can help you generate and store strong, unique passwords for all your accounts so you don't have to remember them all.
Okay, so strong passwords, password manager.
Check and check.
Check and check. What else can we do to protect our devices?
Keep your software updated.
Okay.
Those updates often include security patches that can protect you from the latest threats. And be wary of public Wi-Fi.
Okay.
It might be convenient, but it can also be a breeding ground for hackers.
I never thought about that.
Huh.
I'm always so eager to connect to free Wi-Fi when I'm out and about. But maybe it's worth reconsidering, especially if I'm doing anything sensitive like online banking.
That's a great point. It's always better to err on the side of caution when it comes to public Wi-Fi.
Okay.
And speaking of online banking, the material emphasizes the importance of regularly monitoring your financial accounts.
Right. It's not enough to just set it and forget it.
Exactly.
We need to be actively checking for any suspicious activity.
Make it a habit to review your bank and credit card statements every month. looking for any transactions that you don't recognize.
Right.
And most banks and credit card companies also offer fraud alerts.
Right.
So you can be notified immediately if there's any unusual activity on your account.
You know, I've been meaning to set those up, but I always forget.
Yeah.
Maybe I should add a reminder to my calendar.
That's a great idea.
It's one of those things that just seems like such a hassle
Right.
until something actually goes wrong.
It's like anything else. Prevention is always better than cure. And while you're at it, consider checking your credit report at least once a year.
Okay.
You can get a free copy from each of the 3 major credit bureaus through annualcreditreport.com. This will help you identify any errors or signs of fraudulent activity, such as accounts you didn't open or loans you didn't take out.
It's like taking a financial health checkup.
Exactly.
Making sure everything is in order.
And if you do spot something suspicious, don't hesitate to contact the credit bureau and the relevant financial institutions
Right.
to investigate and resolve the issue.
Okay, so we've talked about protecting our online accounts, monitoring our financial activity, being mindful of what we share online. But what happens if, despite our best efforts, we do become victims of identity theft?
Yeah.
You know, the material mentions that the consequences can be really far-reaching.
They are. It's not just about the financial loss,
Right.
which can be significant.
Yeah.
Identity theft can also have a devastating impact on your emotional well-being and your reputation.
You know, we often hear about the financial side of things,
Right.
but I don't think we talk enough about the emotional toll.
Yeah.
It must be incredibly stressful and upsetting to deal with the aftermath of having your identity stolen.
Absolutely. Imagine having to rebuild your credit dispute, fraudulent charges, and clear your name.
Yeah.
It can feel like an uphill battle.
Right.
And many victims report feelings of anxiety, helplessness, and even violation.
Wow.
The material shares a story about a man whose identity was stolen and used to open multiple credit card accounts.
Oh, gosh.
And he spent months trying to clear his name.
Yeah.
And it took a toll on his relationships, his job, and his overall well-being.
That's so sad. It really highlights like the human side of this crime.
It
The
does.
very real impact it has on people's lives.
And that's why it's so important to know what steps to take if you suspect you've been victimized.
Okay, so let's say the worst has happened. You think your identity has been stolen.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you should do?
The most important step is to act quickly. Time is of the essence in these situations.
Yeah.
First, contact your bank and credit card companies immediately to report any fraudulent activity and freeze your accounts.
So basically shut everything down.
Yes,
Assess the situation.
exactly. Then file a police report.
Okay.
Identity theft is a crime.
Right.
And having a police report can be helpful when dealing with credit bureaus and other institutions. You can also file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, FTC,
All right.
the government agency that handles identity theft cases. They have a website, identitytheft.gov,
Okay.
dedicated to helping victims recover from identity theft.
That's good to know.
It's a great resource with step-by-step instructions and helpful tips.
So it sounds like the key takeaway here is to act fast.
Yes,
Report the crime and seek help from the resources available.
exactly.
It's not something you have to go through alone.
You don't. And remember, it's important to be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Recovering from identity theft can be a long and challenging process.
Right.
But with the right support and resources, you can rebuild your financial security and regain control of your life.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about recognizing the signs of a scam, protecting our personal information,
Right.
and even the steps to take if our identity is stolen.
Yep,
But there's still so much more to explore.
there is.
In the final part, we'll delve into the psychological factors that make us susceptible to scams.
Yes.
We'll look at some emerging trends in the world of cybercrime and wrap up with some key takeaways and actionable steps you can take to protect yourself and your loved ones.
We'll give you everything you need to stay safe.
So stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive. You know, we've been talking about how to spot scams, how to protect ourselves, but I'm curious, what happens after someone falls victim? I imagine it could be a long road to recovery.
It can be. Yeah, recovering from identity theft can be a long and arduous process, often involving a lot of paperwork, phone calls, frustration. The source material actually highlights the emotional impact, which can be as damaging as the financial losses.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We talk about the practical steps,
Right.
like freezing your accounts, filing reports, but we don't really talk about the emotional side of things very much. What are some of the challenges that victims face?
Well, just imagine the feeling of violation, having your sense of security completely shattered.
Right.
Victims often describe feeling angry, betrayed, even foolish, for falling prey to a scam.
Yeah.
The source material mentions a study that found victims of identity theft often experience anxiety, depression, and even PTSD.
Wow, yeah, it's a digital invasion privacy. It's a theft of your identity.
It
It
is.
must be so hard to rebuild that sense of trust, not only in yourself, but in others.
Exactly. And it can impact relationships too. Victims might withdraw from social situations fearing judgment or blame.
Right.
The material shares a story about a woman who was scammed by someone she met online, and she said the experience left her feeling deeply ashamed and betrayed.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these scams aren't just about, numbers on a screen. It's about real people
Right.
and real emotions.
They are.
So what can victims do to kind of cope with this emotional fallout?
Well, first, it's important to remember that you're not alone. Millions of people fall victim to scams every year.
Yeah.
There's no shame in seeking support from friends, family, or even a therapist.
Right.
Talking about the experience can help process those feelings of violation and anger.
It's like any other traumatic experience. Sharing it can be really healing.
Absolutely. And there are also resources available, specifically for victims of identity theft.
Okay.
Organizations like the Identity Theft Resource Center offer counseling support groups, legal guidance. They can help you navigate the complex process of recovery and provide a sense of community and understanding.
So there's hope, even after something as devastating as identity theft. It's about finding the right support
Yeah.
and taking it one step at a time.
Exactly. And, it's interesting because the source material doesn't just focus on individual recovery. It also highlights the importance of collective action. Reporting scams, even if you only lost a small amount of money, can help law enforcement track down these criminals and prevent future victims.
That's a good point. It's easy to think, oh, it's only $50. It's not worth reporting. But every report helps.
It does. It's like putting together a puzzle. Each piece of information, no matter how small, contributes to the overall picture.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on something that's been on my mind throughout this whole deep dive, and that is the evolution of scams.
Okay.
We talk about how sophisticated they've become, but what about the future? What new trends are emerging?
Well, the material does address that. It predicts that scams will become even more personalized and sophisticated, leveraging AI and big data to target individuals with incredible precision.
So it's like those targeted ads, but for scams? That's a little creepy.
It is a bit unnerving. Imagine receiving a scam email or phone call that references your specific interests, your recent purchases, even details about your family.
Wow.
It would be incredibly convincing.
That's scary. So how do we stay ahead of the curve? How do we protect ourselves from scams that feel almost personal?
Well, it comes back to the fundamentals we've been discussing.
Hmm.
Guarding our information, verifying everything, and trusting our gut instincts.
Right.
We need to be even more vigilant, even more skeptical.
So it's like a constant game of cat and mouse, with scammers developing new tactics and us adapting our defenses.
Exactly. But the good news is we're not powerless. We have the knowledge, the resources, and the ability to protect ourselves.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the most important takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think first and foremost, remember that scams and identity theft are serious threats, but they're not insurmountable. By staying informed, being proactive, and taking steps to protect ourselves, we can significantly reduce our risks.
Right, it's all about empowerment, taking control of our online security and not becoming passive victims.
Exactly, and never underestimate the power of reporting scams. Even if you haven't fallen victim, sharing information about suspicious activity can help protect others.
So it's about collective responsibility, creating a safer online environment for everyone.
Absolutely. And finally, remember that if you do become a victim, there's no shame in seeking help. There are resources available to guide you through the process of recovery and support you every step of the way.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of scams and identity theft. We hope you found it informative, empowering, and most importantly, we hope you stay safe out there.